You can fail at something important and recover within weeks. You can face rejection and find your footing. But betrayal sits in a category of its own. Neuroimaging research shows the brain processes this kind of social wound through some of the same pathways it reserves for physical pain. It's not just emotional, it's structural. Betrayal doesn't simply hurt, it dismantles something far deeper, and it begins with what trust actually is. Trust operates as an unwritten, quiet contract between two people. It is far more than a calculated prediction that someone will perform a task well or arrive on time. True trust requires blending that intellectual expectation of reliability with a profoundly emotional decision to rely. When we trust, we make a deliberate choice to suspend our defenses, choosing to place concrete pieces of our safety, our reputation, or our emotional well-being directly into another person's hands. This surrender of control creates a distinct psychological state, the willingness to exist in a position of vulnerability without the need for constant vigilance. In a trusted relationship, the exhausting work of monitoring, verifying, and guarding against harm is suspended. We move through the world, assuming the other person will protect our shared interests, even when we are not there to watch. It is a state of peaceful dependence. Trust is the structural foundation of our emotional security, far more than a social lubricant or polite expectation. It defines the safe zone where we allow ourselves to be fully seen and exposed. To understand the magnitude of the rupture that follows, we must first recognize just how much of our own safety we surrender when we decide to trust. This vulnerability is driven by emotional investment, the raw volume of oneself placed directly into a bond. Over time, a close relationship ceases to be merely external. It becomes a fundamental coordinate on our personal safety map. We navigate our daily lives relying on this coordinate, treating the relationship as a quiet sanctuary to rest, a space to confide, and a scaffold upon which to plan our future security. When we invest this deeply, we integrate another person into our psychological survival. But this reliance is governed by a devastating asymmetry. Building this internal map requires years of quiet accumulation, slow consistency, and shared history. Yet the entire cognitive architecture can be fractured in a single, silent moment. The emotional pain of betrayal arises from the weight the bond was carrying, rather than the mere mechanics of the act itself. When the foundation collapses, the height of the fall is determined by how much of ourselves we stored inside. When this rupture occurs, the brain experiences an expectancy violation. We do not simply feel disappointment. We are disoriented because a predicted reality has suddenly vanished. In processing a breach of trust, the ambiguity of the act and our perception of the other person's intent dictate the severity of the trauma. This distress is not merely cognitive. The nervous system registers social injury through the same neural circuitry that processes physical pain. Neuroimaging reveals that relational breaches activate the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, the brain's somatic alarm systems. Because of this shared pathway, the body reacts with visceral panic, nausea, and autonomic arousal long before the conscious mind can find the language to explain the shock. How we organize this chaos depends largely on our attachment history. Secure individuals may process the grief and establish clear boundaries, while those with anxious patterns often slide into catastrophic rumination and hypervigilance. Avoidant individuals frequently shut down, choosing sudden emotional withdrawal to protect themselves from further vulnerability. But the rupture becomes far more devastating when the betrayer is someone we depend on for survival or economic security. Under these conditions of dependency, the mind may employ a survival strategy known as betrayal blindness. To preserve an essential bond, the brain can actively block awareness of the violation. It is a protective, subconscious silence, proving that sometimes the mind chooses blindness over the unbearable reality of a shattered safe zone. In everyday closeness, these abstract ruptures take on concrete names and faces. Consider a long-standing friendship built on quiet late-night conversations and shared histories. In a single afternoon, a deeply personal struggle, whispered in strict confidence, is posted directly into a public group chat. The violation is instantaneous. The phone vibrates with a sudden cascade of notifications, followed by an abrupt, deafening silence. As mutual friends quietly exit the shared space, The betrayal transforms from a private pain into a public trial. The broken confidence strips away social safety, forcing a sudden, hostile reassessment of belonging. Standing outside the locked gates of a once safe community, the individual faces a devastating reality. The person who held their secrets now holds the power of exile. In romantic life, undisclosed infidelity represents the ultimate dismantling of intimate safety. When a partner violates the unwritten contract of exclusivity, the breach occurs within the bond where emotional and physical dependency is absolute. We construct our daily lives around the assumption of this mutual loyalty, integrating the other person into our psychological survival. When this foundation is shattered by deception, the emotional whiplash retroactively alters the victim's history. It forces a painful, hypervigilant search through years of shared memories to separate truth from lie, destabilizing the capacity to trust one's own perception of reality. In professional environments, a different but vital structure comes under attack. Here, betrayal is experienced through credit theft and promotion sabotage, targeting status and livelihood. When a trusted coworker claims credit for another's project or secretly campaigns against their advancement to secure their own position, the damage strikes directly at competence. It tears at professional identity, the internal sense of self built on years of labor and expertise. The injury scales upward when the organization itself fails to intervene, dismissing formal grievances or protecting toxic performers. This institutional failure strips away the final layer of safety, leaving the worker unprotected, economically vulnerable, and alienated from the workplace system they trusted. Recovery begins by naming the injury. Putting precise words to the shock disrupts the mental fog and intrusive loops that characterize a shattered worldview. Once the breach is identified, the focus shifts to stabilizing the body's overactive alarm system. Chronic hypervigilance exhausts the nervous system, making physiological regulation essential. Somatic practices such as 4-7-8 breathing, strict sleep hygiene, and gentle exercise quiet the autonomic panic, moving the body out of survival mode and back into a state of equilibrium. With the nervous system stabilized, the cognitive work of rebuilding can take place. Structured journaling helps limit rumination by confining repetitive thoughts to the page. Rather than rushing to restore forced closeness, healing depends on establishing clear boundaries and using calibrated trust testing. Safety is rebuilt slowly by exposing oneself to small, measurable actions, observing how the other person responds over time. Genuine repair develops through consistent, predictable micro-behaviors like transparent scheduling, timely updates, and active accountability, rather than a single dramatic gesture. This process requires separating forgiveness from reconciliation. Forgiveness is a unilateral, internal release of resentment for one's own peace. Reconciliation is a bilateral contract that remains impossible without the transgressor's sustained behavioral integrity. In professional environments, this structural healing depends on clear transparency protocols, third-party audits, and structured restorative meetings with set agendas. When a breach is severe, repetitive, or traumatic, seeking professional therapy offers the external support needed to work through the debris, allowing individuals to slowly and safely reconstruct their capacity to trust. Rebuilding after betrayal is not about erasing the scar, but accepting the vulnerability it reveals. To trust again is a profound act of courage, a choice to remain open in a world that has proven it can hurt us. If this resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments.